fill up the top box with turkey sandwiches as we make our way down to St Mary's, that area of Southampton where their stadium is located, for a festive fixture with a kick-off at the sainted hour of 3 p.m. No trains, of course, and speaking from personal experience, traffic in that city can be a real sod on Boxing Day, coinciding as it does with the so-called January sales. I believe there are some bus services running over there, so it might be worthwhile parking in the outer suburbs and hoping and hopping on one of those. So Southampton then. Oh dear. Even at this stage of the season, it's looking a bit bleak for them. Their record this season reads: played 18, won 1, drawn 3, lost 13. Their last 6 has seen them lose at home to Liverpool, Chelsea and Tottenham. That's 3-2, 5-1 and 5-0 respectively. Pick up 2 points from away draws at Brighton, 1-1, and Fulham 0-0, and lose 1-0 away at Villa. They're a bit unlucky not to take Liverpool to penalties in the League Cup, benefiting from the typical refereeing decision in favour of the Scousers at the death. Referee Chris Kavanagh adhering to the PGMOL rule that you only give free kicks against Liverpool if there are firearms involved in the offence. Seems the authorities have stuck their pension funds on a Liverpool League Cup win, judging by the rigged home draw and the dodgy decisions in both their subsequent games. Back to Southampton, and bottom on 6 points with an 8-point gap to the safety refuge of 17th, in a season that's seen 1 win in 18, and even that was against Everton, is the sort of form that sees managers sacked. So they sack the manager. Exit Russell Martin and enter Croatian coach Ivan Juric. Juric arrived after a less than inspiring spell with Roma, lasting less than 2 calendar months, at the end of which he left I Giallorossi hovering above the Serie A trapdoor a mere 4 points above the relegation zone. All things are relative, of course, and I'm sure Southampton fans would give their right arms to be in such a spot at present. However, the length of Juric's contract might be a bit of a giveaway as to his brief. An 18-month deal simply screams, do what you can this season, but your main job is to get us back up next year. Daisy's been in a bit of an odd mood this week. She's been threatening all sorts of repercussions if her Christmas present comes from the Esso garage down the road. As if. There's a much better selection at the BP garage in the opposite direction, which is handily located opposite the Swan and Super Injunction pub. I think her angst may have been caused by seeing the list of players that they signed over the summer. No fewer than 27 of them, including loan signings. She whittled that number down a bit by leaving out those that were immediately loaned out, those that were signed for academy development purposes, and those that she simply couldn't be bothered with. So relatives of the splendidly named Bailey de Pipa are likely to be disappointed, unless they count that mention just now. The first player to pass the Daisy triage process. I'm sure I've got a Daisy triage process album somewhere in the collection. That was defender Taylor Harwood-Bellis. Harwood-Bellis was one of those who wasn't actually a new signing as such. He spent most of last season on loan at St Mary's from Man City, the terms of the loan providing that Southampton would have to buy the player for £20 million if they got promoted. They were, so they did. Harwood-Bellis made his England debut in the recent 5-0 win over Ireland, scoring in the process. His goal was welcomed with gritted teeth by his future father-in-law, Roy Keane. They picked up former player Adam Lallana on a free from Brighton. At 36, he's probably grateful for somewhere to go other than the library these days. They also raided Burnley and Peterborough for defenders Charlie Taylor and Ronnie Edwards, respectively. Nothing particularly spectacular about those signings, except that the player names hark back to the days of my youth. Proper football names, none of your Taylors, Flynns or double-barrelled surname nonsense. Just good old-fashioned Charlie and Ronnie. Talking of Flynns, the loan deal that saw Flynn Downs help them gain promotion last year was made permanent in a deal reported to be worth about £15 million. A lifelong hammer, Downs was an unused sub that night in Prague, which means that he's got one more winner's medal than Harry Kane, which is nice. Many clubs will be thinking, we may have dodged a bullet there, looking at the career of Ben Brereton Diaz since he left Blackburn during a moderately successful spell at Ewood Park. Having gone through and been released by the youth systems at Manchester United and Stoke, he ended up at Forest. 8 goals in 53 league appearances suggested that some early promise might not be that easy to fulfil. and he went on loan to Blackburn in 2018, with £7 million being sufficient to make the deal permanent in January 2019. He seemed to find his niche in Lancashire, particularly in 2021, where he scored 22 goals in 37 appearances in the league. The stats dropped off a bit in 2022-23 when he scored 14 in 43, but this wasn't enough to dissuade Villarreal from picking up the player on a free once his contract at Ewood had expired. His spell with the Yellow Submarine was not what you might call prolific, and following 14 games without a goal, it was decided that the player's future lay elsewhere. A half-season loan at Sheffield United ensued, which saw him score his first against us in the infamous Michael Salisbury "I don't care what I have to do, this game's finishing as a draw" match. However, newly promoted Southampton were always going to be a better pool than a freshly relegated and out of options to falsely blame anyone else Sheffield United, and the Saints picked him up for a relatively cheap £7 million, making Villarreal's accountants rather happy at the pay-per-profit percentage. If the player had hoped for an instant boost to his career, he didn't get it. He's without a goal in 10 league appearances this season. Making a slightly more significant contribution to the goals for column, somewhat lacking in content at the moment, is Cameron Archer. His goal in the League Cup against Liverpool was a bit of a corker, and whilst he's only joint top scorer in the league with 2, overall he has the lead taking into account all competitions with a further 3 in the League Cup to his name. He cost £15 million to bring in from Villa, for whom he'd failed to score in the league, his career there largely being punctuated by loan spells elsewhere. We should, of course, mention poor old Maxwell Cornet at this point. He wouldn't have been eligible to play in this one anyway. However, having elected to revive his injury-hit career down at St Mary's, he would have appeared to have played for them even less than he did for us, though he doesn't seem to be on the injured list. At this point, Daisy decided she'd have enough and went to find The Great Escape on the box. She loves that film, though she does have a few words to say on the standard of tunnel construction. So with that in mind, we'll move on to the festive edition of the wild and wacky world of association football, which, frankly, is pretty much the same as every other edition, apart from the inclusion of the word festive in the intro. The boss said I had to show a bit more festive spirit, so consider that contractual obligation now fulfilled. On the naughty step this week is Chelsea winger Mikhailo Mudryk, who has tested positive for an as yet unspecified substance, and as with every other athlete in the same situation, he has professed complete ignorance of how whatever it was got into his system. David Coote told me it was just some smelling salts that referees use all the time, and if you can't trust the referee, it's just one of the things our lawyers have asked us to make clear that the player never said. Meanwhile, up on Merseyside, Everton's takeover by the Freaking Group has been completed. Freaking Group also own the aforementioned Roma, whose fortunes have improved since they dispensed with the services of Juric, who, if you were paying attention earlier, you will have noted were 4 points off the drop zone when Juric was sacked. Everton are also 4 points off the drop zone at time of writing. Better stock up on those throat pastilles while you have the chance, Mr. Dyche. Let's move on to us. I thought that was a good point out of what was a pretty poor game overall. The second half was better, I suppose, and we did ride our luck a couple of times, but a point from that one I think was the right result. Yet again, we found ourselves in the hands of Rob Jones, who would have got more decisions correct had he sat in the changing room blindfold and tossed a coin as to which way to give a free kick for a foul. Poor old Paquetá picked up a yellow for something that had happened to him on numerous occasions during the match. Liverpool tactic number 1 being very much in play for the visitors on Saturday. Jones ought to be on a suspension for his decision to award only a yellow for the challenge by Estupiñán, I think that's how you pronounce it, on Kilman. In what perverted universe does a reckless, out-of-control, 2-footed lunge over the top of the ball only merit a yellow? I'm not sure if VAR looked at it or if PGMOL have come out with their usual retrofitted lies to back up their employee, but the only thing more disgusting than the challenge was Jones's reaction to it. On the absence front this week, I think it's fair to say that Mickey may be a fair bit away from a return, but I'll mention him every week just so he knows we haven't forgotten him. Mavropanos faces a 50-50 injury test on a knock that saw him miss the second half last weekend. Paquetá misses out after his yellow against Brighton made it 5 for the season. However, on the bright side, Soler will return to the squad, having served his one-match suspension. The press conference earlier this week suggested that 2 unnamed players were nursing injuries. I have no idea whether that included Mavropanos or not. The boss was remaining rather tight-lipped on the subject. So let's move on to the prediction then. Well, we've already had one new manager bounce defeat this season, though to be fair we ought to have won that by a mile. Yet another bundle of poor refereeing decisions contributing as much to the result as Leicester did. This is a game where there may be some initial enthusiasm from the home side, but an early-ish goal would see the heads go down. And despite our reputation as sequence busters, this is what I see happening. So the £2 that, thanks to the oh-so-generous Christmas present from the club, I could have spent in the club shop, will instead be going on an away win. I make it 3-1 to us, please, Mr. Winston. Enjoy the game.